We've got it all wrong. There's no good guys and bad guys. They're all bad guys. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Book Reviews. I'm your host here, Kyron, live on the 9th of April 2025. And as you might surmise, this is the Book Reviews podcast where I gush about my love of children. Okay. I don't actually mind children, but not the children in this book that we have here for today. We've got Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This was a 1911 book, although it was based on a 1904 play. 231 pages in total. I'd say it took me like 4 to 5 hours reading to get through. It's not that big. And this one in particular is not an illustrated version. So it's all of the just writing with only a couple of little tiny illustrations. So if for those who are unaware of the story of Peter Pan, it's a classic story of a child who never grows up. And basically, Peter lives in Neverland. He's a flying little impish type character, probably around the age of 12-ish, if you had to put it. I don't think that he's given an actual age. And this is because he never grows up as well. He is this ageless, eternal, mythical being. In Neverland, it's this mystical island where you can find pirates and coves and mermaids and beasts and wild native Indians and, forts and houses where the kids create these things, and the Lost Boys, who Peter somewhat commands. Peter is a rather naughty little boy, and he likes to go on adventures, and he finds some children in the real world, this being Wendy, John, and Michael, and he brings them over to his mystical land, sort of in imagine like a dream type trance is how I guess you would describe how the children come over, and they're accompanied by the ever nasty little Tinkerbell, a fairy, and they go on all sorts of adventures, fighting pirates like Captain Hook, and getting into mishaps with the Neverbird and the ocean rising, and helping save the Indians and fighting them and all these sorts of things. So not too much actually happens in this book. There is 17 chapters in total, and you're probably only exposed to I would say 3 adventures on the actual island, and a lot of it is spent in the going to the island and then also coming back from the island. So of these chapters, you've got like Peter breaks through, the shadow, come away, the flight, the island come true, the pirate ship, hook or me this time, the return home, when Wendy grew up, etc., etc. This is the vintage classics version for those who are wondering as well. So let's jump into the themes and questions. Why does this appeal to kids? What happens when you grow up? What morals can perhaps we learn from these tales? And to start off with, let's address the crocodile in the room. Almost every character in this tale is a complete and utter asshole. Flying little assholes, in fact. And this can take in some shape or form. They're not all pure assholes. Peter definitely is. But mostly they show this via their communication style, emotional reactions to situations, actions that they physically take, and somewhat via their intent as well. Now, this is understandable if you're being an asshole to your mortal enemies, and there are kind of a lot of danger and things happening in this book, which you could go, okay, you can understand why you might be construed as an asshole in this context. But really, it's when it is applied to their own friends is where we see the real asshole behavior coming out. And when I say arsehole, I just mean they're not good people. They're not moral. They're rather mean. And to give this some substantiation, let's look at some of the instances that happen. We have Peter locking Tinkerbell in a cupboard. We have Tinkerbell being more than happy to try and kill Wendy via lighting her up for gunshots when they're flying after meeting her only a day or two earlier. We have Peter making his friend starve while playing make-believe. We have the mermaids not playing with the kids and doing all the things on their own. We have Peter bullying his friends while playing pirates and becoming somewhat of a tyrant. We have Mr. Darling punishing Nana, the dog, for his own embarrassment because he doesn't like to take his medicine. We have Peter trying to shut the window and by doing so makes the kids think that their parents don't love them so that they will stay with him forever on Neverland. We have Hook hooking his underlings and just straight up gangster murdering them. We have Peter forgetting to visit Wendy every year and only showing up, as he kind of feels like it and things. It's a constant show of heartlessness, carelessness, and cockiness. And I think we're perhaps in just my little explanations there. You might, one in the comments also say, Peter literally forgets people when they're gone. Correct. Are we noticing a pattern of who is the biggest asshole here? I think we are. Probably the only people that really come out of this book net good are Mrs. Darling, Wendy, I would say, and animals like the Neverbird, which try to help Peter when he's in he saves Peter's life, or she saves Peter's life. Probably she, because she was the one laying the eggs. And even then, she's berating him and yelling at him whilst trying to save his life. So like almost all situations, probably only the women in the book are the ones who really come out not looking like assholes. Now, why is this? Why do the people, and not only the kids, but the adults in the story behave like this? And I think it's because it is this childlike vision of Neverland that's the real core of it. Kids, you can understand of not really knowing what asshole behavior is because, you're just a kid. You're just reacting. You don't have the, I guess, like the consciousness, awareness to be able to realize like, oh, my actions have consequences and other people kind of feel the way that I feel. And if I'm feeling bad and I've hurt them, that's really my fault. And that empathy component is kind of lacking. And so Neverland's nice because it allows you to just have whatever emotions happen and you can indulge in them. So if you're envious, you can hurt people. If you're angry, you can shout and fight. If you're sleepy, you can just stop wherever and nap. If you're bored, you can annoy other people. If you're jealous, you can steal their stuff. And it's all kind of permitted, and there's no real social consequences or consequences of any sort for these things. And if there are kind of consequences, but they're not viewed in this real negative light. And so it does show the kids and Peter doing nice things for people. So Wendy, for example, when she's almost on death's door, they build a house for her, and Peter does save Tiger Lily. But even though these actions were kind of good things, he does them for fun, not because they're a righteous and good thing to do. He does it for his own amusement. So, even in this case, when he is doing nice things, he's not doing it with the intent of goodness. It's for his own selfishness. And Neverland is the place of selfishness. You can do whatever you want. Now, look, there are bad things that happen in Neverland. Hook kills multiple people. The children do have bad experiences and they do feel negative emotions, but it's all kind of whitewashed away. And I'll talk more about the style of this in the following section on the author. But growing up in this world is kind of viewed as a bad thing, not because of the responsibility aspect, but more because you can't indulge in these fleeting emotions. So you have to go to school and learn solemn things, Peter decries when Mrs. Darling is trying to persuade him to live in the real world. And it also means you can't believe anymore, as Wendy loses her ability to fly once she grows up. She can't believe, and it's almost like the scales falling over the eyes, falling from the eyes if you're using a biblical context, which is once you see the truth cannot be unseen sort of deal. And this is why Peter wants to live in this world. He doesn't want exposure to the real world, because then I think the knowledge of the truth and how he's acting and hurting people would probably be untenable. He wouldn't be able to live in that. And so, I think when people grow up, it's their understanding of that real world actions have real world consequences. Whereas in Neverland, the death, the starvation, the kidnapping, the fighting, the pain, they all have this ambivalent quality to them. They're part of a grand adventure. So Peter, for example, is happiest when his friends are at death's door or have just been kidnapped by the pirates or someone's in danger. And he's not like stressed out about this. He's just like, all right, sweet, let's go, let's get into action. This is going to be awesome. Cool little adventure with very little thought of like, oh, I could lose my best friend and, never see them again or something like that. So I guess like, what are the morals that you can take from this? Well, who are the unhappiest characters in the book? Sure, people have the momentary ones of sadness. Mr. and Mrs. Darling, for example, when their kids have been, gone missing for an indeterminate period of time. And Nana, you could add to that as well. The lost boys certainly feel this loneliness of not having a mother. And Wendy gets, upset when they do things like stay past their bedtime or things like this. The Hook's subordinates certainly feel fear for him and pain when they're in fights, and the native Indians and things like this as well. But no, the two unhappiest characters are certainly Peter Pan and Captain Hook. And Peter, in his moments of inactivity, right before he's going to bed, right after all of his friends have left him and they want to go back to the real world, we see he is indeed this lost and sad boy, and is kind of covering up all of his pain by going on these adventures and, having fun via sword fighting and having a mortal enemy of Captain Hook and things like this. Nobody really loves him, and he is unlovable because of his cockiness, because of his arrogance, because of his lack of care of other people. You could almost say that he's kind of bipolar in some respect, in that his handling of emotions, he has no emotional stability. He is just all over the place. Hook, on the other hand, is constantly terrified of this ever-persistent ticking crocodile. You can dive into like the Jordan Peter-esque version of this and saying like it's a metaphor for time, and he's worried about the time clicking up to him, and time's already got a hold of him. And I wish I could do a squeaky Jordan Peterson voice, but I can't. He just can't let go of this obsession that he has with Peter. And if he could, he'd probably be fine. He'd still be a bad person because he's a pirate, and you can see the way he treats his subordinates and stuff. But he is living in this world of perpetual unaccountability. In this fantasy world, I think is just masking or trying to hide these inner pains that they're feeling. Or maybe they're having a grand time. What do I know? It's a freaking children's book, right? Like, you probably don't need to look into it too deeply. So let's jump on into the author and perhaps some extra details. James Matthew Barrie, J.M. Barrie, born in 1860, a Scottish novelist. As I mentioned, this was a play first, which was then adapted into a book. And it seemed like it was a very successful play of the time as well when it came out in the early 1900s. People being attached to strings and wires and flying all over the stage and stuff, and you could see, it's a good story. It is an interesting world and concept, because this was also in the era where fantasy, I guess, was just becoming a kind of a genre. He was influenced by one of the classic books, which was the one on the island of Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. That sort of thing was a novelty. It was a rarity of this kind of mixing of real world with fantasy, whereas most things before that were more purely, I guess, in the fantasy or mythical realm, if I had to put it. Now, the character itself of Peter Pan was somewhat modeled after his brother, who had died when he was kind of probably around, Peter Pan's age, this 12 years, and his mother was heartbroken of losing her favorite child and kind of wanted J.M. Barrie to be his brother in some sort of respect. And so this motif of the ageless child, I guess, was formed from probably these personal experiences in his life. Little interesting tidbit here was he popularized the name Wendy. There was some examples of it beforehand, but Wendy, one of the main characters in this book, the kind of motherly girl, was not a popular name before this, and was actually taken from another child who was interacting with J.M. Barrie and was trying to say friendly, but couldn't pronounce the R, so it was like Fwendy, and so he got the name Wendy from that. To kind of frame up all of this, I've seen multiple Peter Pan movies in my life, most of them when I was a kid, all of them when I was a kid, actually. So even though I'd never been told this from what I can recall or read the book, certainly this was my first reading of it, I knew kind of the general storyline, but I didn't have the full context of everything was in here. So, for example, I think Hook has been done a real disservice in the movies and cartoons that I've watched of him. Not only the physical descriptions, which I just completely wrong. So, for example, his right hand should have the hook, not the left, as is written in the book, whereas in most of the things it's the opposite. And he's certainly not as silly as he'd been made out to be. His atmosphere is nowhere near as dangerous and cutting as the image I gave to him in my mind's eye. I kind of feel like he was a more complex character, but they made him just this sort of simple evil buffoon in the animes and the movies, whereas I thought he actually had a bit of depth to him. Look at what they did to my boy. So James, the author, kind of made the narrator of this snarky, heartless, quippy guy who's making fun of everyone and everything. I haven't read out anything here. I wonder if I could find something real quick. Probably not, but there's certainly pieces of this where he was making fun of everyone and everything, even if they had a good emotion and stuff like this. And while this is fun, I didn't realize just how brutal and satirical the book is. Like, many people die in this, and many people experience a whole lot of pain, and I just wasn't ready for it, I guess. And when I say satirical, I mean in the ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices. There's a whole lot of that going on in this book. I thought it was more magical and fun and playful, whereas when you're reading this, you're like, God damn, this, like, not only are there a whole bunch of assholes in this, but the narrator himself is kind of snarky, is probably the best way to put it. Now, he does a great job of making this world come to life, but I was surprised at how unlikable the characters are. Peter's cockiness is the thing that drives Captain Hook to insanity, and I can see why. That little shit is so annoying. God damn, being around him for even 5 minutes would be too much. Tinkerbell is just a right-on bitch, like just pure bitch who, upon getting saved, for example, immediately wants to fight the haters rather than the people who have rescued her. And when I say rescued her, it was little children cheering her on and clapping for her is kind of what saved her when she drank some poison. So it's like, man, okay, these characters are just so unlikable. Like, how can you root for them? Like, how is this a story of like bad guys and good guys? They're all bad guys. For me, the most likable was actually Hook. He had morals. He was concerned about kind of good form versus bad form. Yet also he wasn't afraid to break form by surprising the Indians by doing a sneak attack, for example. I found him to be a complex character who I actually felt for. The fear of the crocodile, the loneliness of command, this deathly rage that he tries to keep a handle on, leadership skills that he shows to prevent a mutiny. The, I think, somewhat justifiable crusade against Peter Pan. If he'd killed Peter, I'm not sure the world would have been that much a worse a place. So let's jump onto the summary. Similar books, recommendations, perhaps. Look, it's a good book for creating a new world. One of wonder for sure. Also, these brutal things that are somewhat made fun of. So Neverland is a rather interesting place. I enjoyed the creation of this mystical island. And I actually would have liked to know more about the quirks of this world. Like, for example, what happens with fairies? What's their kind of deal? Because you hear of how there's fairies who are girls, there's boy fairies, and then there's these ones that are kind of like in between. I'd like to know the pecking order of the beasts, the backstory of the crocodile, for example, why the mermaids behave the way they do. I love the world, and I would have preferred the focus to be on that rather than the adventures of Peter and kind of character development, because I don't think there's much character development. they're shown to be arseholes from the right at the start, and there's not a whole lot more going on beneath the surface. I found them unlikable for the most part, but even worse, boring. There was plenty of boring characters in this who I just went like whatever, the Lost Children or whatever, Tiger Lily, like the character development that did go on, I found to be shallow. So, I can't say I really connected with anyone apart from Hook. Does this make me a bad person? Probably. And I was not expecting the mature writing just to find within this, not only the jokes about Tinkerbell's embonpoint, which I learned is like curvy flesh of the woman, or just curvy flesh, I guess, in general. But fairies coming home from an orgy, for example, the killings, the scalpings, the poisonings. If you're a kid and reading this, I'm not sure what morals you take from this, and I'm really not sure what you learnt, because there's not a whole lot of good things going on in this book. So, look, overall, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 10. Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. It's a strange book. I wasn't really expecting it to be like it is. And would I read it to children in the future? I'm not sure about it, to be honest, because I'm not sure what they can. Maybe kids love it, and who knows? Similar books recommendations. I'm trying to think of a children's book which has this kind of roughness to it. Probably something like that. Robinson Crusoe is about as close as you'll get. That's more mature writing because it's about a man and it's not about children. Things like Pan, the movie, where it's kind of scary. It's got kids in it, but it's weird as well. Probably some of the old grim fairy tales would also be similar to these sorts of things. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining in. This is a Value for Value podcast, available anywhere, anytime, for anyone. No ads, no sponsorships, no things like that. All of this just juicy value coming straight at you, and we just ask that you return it in some shape or form. Time by hitting the share button, joining live when I do these. Of word of mouth is really important to podcasts like this. Of talent, give me your book recommendations. What did you like? What do you think I would like? Maybe even your thoughts on this book. I would love to hear. You can do that either in the YouTube comments or via reaching out to us via any of the social media links down below. And then finally, Treasure. There is a PayPal link down below if you want to send us some money for all the lights, camera, equipment, energy spent on these things and things like this. So, as I mentioned, I am live here, 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Wednesday. I'll be doing this for the next month, and then it's going to be a bit haphazard while I'm traveling in Europe. We do have Juan joining us. He was just saying all the rights and royalties go to a hospital as well for this book, which is cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I think it must be getting pretty close to entering public domain, so I don't know if the rights and royalties and those sorts of things still work like that. Maybe public domain, I guess, means you can just use the actual words, but perhaps there is still a copyright on the actual character of Peter Pan, the flying arsehole himself. He says, listening to 1x speed is crazy. I'm usually at 2.5 for your stuff. Man, gonna melt your brain with that. So thank you very much, Juan, for joining in at regular speed. And what's coming up, I am reading Neuromancer at the moment by William Gibson. I'm not sure what Juan's got. He's been pretty busy moving house, so that's why he hasn't really been putting out any book reviews, but I'm sure when he gets all that sorted in the next month, maybe he'll have time, because then he's going to be traveling as well. We're both traveling for his wedding, which is coming up in June. So lots of exciting stuff going on for us, and we will try and keep these book reviews coming out on a weekly basis, but there might be a couple of months there where it's a little bit haphazard. So thank you very much for joining in. I do hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, in the real world, not in Neverland. And ciao for now. Karen out. Bye.